Right here, I have a brand new case from Corsair, the 2500X. It has that same fishbowl design that's been very popular lately, as you can see, but it also very much so reminds me of old dual chamber cases that Corsair used to make, like the 280X, for example, or even the Air 540 that should be about 10 years old today. But this new case is definitely a big step up in terms of quality when you compare it to those old models. It is almost completely made out of metal and glass, and it has very few plastic details, which is definitely a very good thing. So let's check it out. Let's see how it performs, what features it offers, and if we can justify its €150 or $160 price tag. Let's begin. Even though it looks pretty large, this is actually a micro ATX case and it won't fit typical ATX motherboards. It is about 38 centimeters tall, 30 centimeters wide, and 48 centimeters deep. So it actually has a larger footprint and a bigger volume than a 4000D Airflow, for example, or similar mid-tower ATX cases. It is just less tall. So it's definitely not an MATX case you would buy because you're trying to use your desk space effectively and in the most efficient way. This is a type of a case that you consider because you really like the looks of it and not because you worry about the footprint. And speaking of looks, they're always very subjective, and for me personally, this case looks good. It has that glass side going into the glass front that we've seen in a lot of cases lately, but it is also instantly recognizable as a Corsair case. And as I said at the start, it reminds me a lot of their old 280X, but this one is built much better. So the top, the front, the side panel, even the feet are made of metal instead of plastic, giving it a much more premium feel than its predecessors. And they only use plastic on a very few spots where it was unavoidable. It is a dual chamber case, so the motherboard, GPU, and whatever cooling and fans you plan on using are on one side, while the power supply, storage, and most cables are hidden in the second chamber behind the motherboard. And the model I have here is a glass version of the case that has that fishbowl style design and a glass front and a glass side panel, leaving the sides, top, and bottom of the case for airflow, but you can also get a 2500D that is an airflow version that comes with a mesh front instead. There are two colors available, black and white, and I obviously have the white version right here, but they should be launching an optional wooden upgrade kit as well, which completely changes the look of this case. Now, I have the pre-production version of that wooden kit, and our sample does have pretty good build quality. So it is basically a metal plate with a wood panel on top of it with that proper wood smell when you take it out of the box. And as far as I know, there will be different color options for that as well, but unlike some other cases that have replaceable panels, it is not that quick to swap them around. So there are quite a few screws that you need to first undo, then screw back on for every single panel. So it is not hard to do it, but it's definitely not something that you want to do very often. On the top panel, you get a power button, reset button, two USB Type-A ports, one USB Type-C port, and a combined audio jack, which is pretty standard. And the panels themselves are very well built, and they come off easily using the same click mechanism that we've seen on a lot of recent cases, but then with thumb screws in the back for some extra support. You get nice fine dust filters on the panels themselves, as well as a large dust filter on the bottom of the case that is easily removable from the front. Internally, you get two chambers, as I mentioned earlier, with enough space for an MATX motherboard, cooling, and GPU on one side, and a power supply, cables, and storage on the other. The main difference compared to previous MATX cases would be additional holes to accommodate both ASUS BTF and MSI Project Zero motherboards that have connections on the back to minimize the amount of cables you can see through the glass. And even though Gigabyte's Project Stealth is not really specifically mentioned here, their boards should be compatible with this case as well. And speaking of compatibility, it shouldn't be much of an issue for most components out there since this is a pretty large case. It can fit GPUs of up to 40 centimeters of length, air coolers of up to 180 millimeters of height, and if you decide to go for water cooling, you can fit a 280 or a 360 millimeter radiator on top or on the bottom of the case, and 240 millimeter radiator on the side. The glass version doesn't fit anything in the front, but if you go for for the mesh version, you could fit a 240 or a 280 millimeter radiator in the front as well. If you decide to mount your GPU vertically, you can easily rotate this bracket in the back. Just keep in mind that the GPU riser is not included and you will have to buy it separately. The back of the case has a fairly typical layout as well. You have plenty of space for cables and you get lots of space for cable management. Now, of course, if you don't have any patience at all, you can just stuff the cables in and not think about it anymore, because no one will ever see it ever. But if that gives you anxiety, you can also just spend your time and tie them up neatly. Storage options are quite decent as well. You get a storage drawer in the back for two 3.5-inch drives, and on the inside you have two additional brackets for 2.5-inch drives. You can use large ATX power supplies of up to 225 millimeters, but you also get an SFX bracket if you want to go for a smaller power supply like I did for this build. Just keep in mind that the SFX cables are usually shorter and might not reach everything easily, depending on your build, of course. So there is a lot of space and a lot of options for most components, with the only limiting factor being the micro ATX motherboard. The 2500X doesn't come with any fans, and it doesn't have a fan hub, and it doesn't have an RGB hub. So feature-wise, there's not much to talk about today. They should be launching a 2500X RGB model in a few weeks that will include two iCue Link fans and a Link controller, and it should cost about $60 more in the US or about 80 euros more here in the EU. So if you're looking for a case with fans and controllers, you will have to wait a bit longer. For my build right here, I went with the B650M Aorus Elite AX ICE motherboard, a Ryzen 9 7950X so we can generate some heat for testing, and an RTX 4080 Aero to keep up with the whole white silver / Gigabyte theme. And cooling wise, I went with Corsair's 360mm all-in-one cooler, the H150i Elite LCD XT, and then added two AF120 RGB Elite fans to the side and one to the back, and then some AF120 RGB slim fans to the bottom of the case as intakes. Now, you can fit regular fans on the bottom too, but I actually ran out of regular white Corsair fans, so these were the next best thing. And yes, this is definitely a huge overkill from a cooling perspective, but it is also very RGB heavy, and if you're going for a case like this one, and for Corsair in general, you're probably going into their whole RGB ecosystem anyway. In terms of building, it was really easy to work with this case because there's a ton of space on both sides. I would say it's definitely beginner friendly and great for anyone that likes to build quickly, even if you add tons of fans to your build. And I didn't notice any sharp edges or inconsistencies or anything else really, so it really feels like a well-made case. The only real thing that I was missing was some sort of a GPU holder. Now the Aero does come with a holder that you need to mount directly to the motherboard, but unfortunately it is not compatible with M-ATX motherboards, so I do miss something that will hold this very large and very heavy GPU in place. And I do think that with the GPUs getting bigger and bigger every generation, a GPU holder should really become a standard in every case pretty much. While gaming, and with the fans limited to 40 decibels at 50 centimeters of distance, which is what I think is a nice noise level for a system under load, and with the RTX 4080 pulling just over 300 watts, all temps looked great. The GPU averaged at 59 degrees Celsius on the cores and on the memory, and the CPU sat in the low 60s with a 120 watt load. The case temperature was just over 30 degrees, which is a very good result because I usually say 40 degrees is a decent limit for an internal air temperature, and this case doesn't even come close to that. And this is with 6 extra fans, but if you just install 3 at the bottom or 2 on the side, you shouldn't run into any real issues either. And with just a CPU workload, things looked even better, as you would expect from a setup that has a water cooler that pushes all the hot air that the CPU creates straight out of the top of the case. Now, I don't think Corsair did anything really surprising with this case. I think we all kind of expected them to come up with their version of a panorama style case. and they did exactly that, but then with a design that still feels very much so like a Corsair case. So it clearly has the same DNA as its predecessors, and it's not really doing anything different just for the sake of standing out. But in terms of quality, I would say it's pretty outstanding. It is heavy, it is built really well with a lot of metal and glass and barely any plastic. And as far as I can see, without having any obvious corners cut or quality control issues. So it actually feels like that premium option that you would expect from Corsair's premium pricing, which wasn't always the case in the past. Now, you can definitely find some more affordable options on the market if you look for them, and then especially so if you start adding Corsair fans and other Corsair accessories to the mix. But not all of them would offer the same quality or the same RGB ecosystem as Corsair does. And if you don't like this design, or if you want a smaller micro ATX system, this isn't the case for you. But if you do like it, I don't think the price is that excessive or that unreasonable for what you're getting with this case, and I can easily recommend it if this is the style you're going for and if it fits your budget. Now that is all I had for today, but before I go, let's check out the sponsor of this video. This video was brought to you by Seasonic and their Vertex power supplies. These fully modular power supplies are extremely efficient and very quiet due to their fan design and their hybrid fan mode that stops the fans completely under 40% load. They come with a variety of connections for any kind of system you have in mind, including the 12-volt high-power cable for the latest NVIDIA graphics cards. And to wrap it all up, they now offer a nice and cozy 12-year-long warranty. Check them out using the links in the description below. Thank you all for watching and for staying to the end of this video. If you liked it and if you want to see more content like this one, please do consider clicking that subscribe button so you never miss my future uploads. Bye guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!